for joining again. Kirsten Kloss here with Netcast Event. Appreciate you joining us again for our author interviews. Today we have Craig Elias. Craig is the author of Shift. Shift is a book basically about harnessing the trigger events that turn prospects into customers. Correct? He's also the contributing author to the #1 best-selling book, Master of Sales. And he won a great prize, the $1 million prize in a $1 billion idea pitch competition. That's quite a feat. Have you burned through the $1 million yet?
Unfortunately, it was an investment in a company. It wasn't money that they gave me.
But the company is still going.
The company died in about 2006, and that's when I took on my new life as a stay-at-home dad and wrote the book and started going through that whole process.
Oh, there you go. Well, it's obviously a fantastic idea if it won the pitch prize. And Chris and I actually met you at one of your speeches actually.
Okay.
And it was with 3 fellows. And I won't mention who they were because their presentations were weak, and I was quite impressed with Craig. Now I'm really patronizing that. But anyways, it was quite enlightening, some ideas. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to hand this off to Chris Hamilton. Chris knows Craig as well, and I'm going to let Chris ask some questions about the idea of shift selling and the idea of harnessing the power of technology in order to find those moments of opportunity in business where you can go and get in there and maybe get a warm lead opportunity. So Chris, I'm going to just pass it on to you, and you can maybe carry it on from here.
You betcha. Appreciate it, Kirsten. Craig, thanks a lot for accepting our offer to be interviewed. A couple of quick things. I first met you at, I think it was Bar Camp. Guy Kawasaki was talking, and I was at IBM at the time, but I met you, and you were telling me about shift selling. And I gotta admit, first time you told me about it, I was like a deer in the headlights, right? And then Kirsten told me about the condensed Coles Notes version of it very quickly, and I go, oh, I totally get it now, right? And somehow or other, you and I have formed this kind of basically cell phone relationship before we actually really got re-engaged with each other again at some point in time. But the other interesting fact is I did not realize that you were a #1 best contributing author to a bestseller, as am I. So I think you and I are the only two. Here we are. This is the ego coming into play. I think you and I are the only two in Calgary that are #1 best-selling or contributing authors to a best-selling book. So that's
good.
Awesome.
And I think yours was with Jeffrey Gitomer, right?
Mine was with Gitomer. Yep. Who's was yours?
Mine was with the guys over at, they're going to shoot me. Those guys. Ivan Meisner. And what's the referral group he has that runs? He's going to shoot me.
Don't worry. I hate to put you on the spot. Sorry.
BNI. Sorry. I brain fart. Business Networking International. In fact, he, as a result of that, he actually ended up becoming an endorser of the book. Yeah.
Oh, really? Yeah. Excellent. So you and I are like this Uber powerhouse in Calgary, I guess, eh?
Well, I'll tell you, even though you and I might be Uber powerhouses, I think I will say that the guy you did co-author the book with has a bigger ego than all of us.
Yeah. He's actually a super nice guy, but man, he is he could be abrupt and to the point actually on a lot of things. So, anyways, Craig, I want to get into talking about probably numerous things. I mean, most of the times when we have people on, it's typically authors who have written a book and they're out kind of promoting their book. Your book has been out for quite a while. I think what prompted us was you and I and Kirsten went out for lunch about a month and a half ago. And I literally, so few people that I get around when they're talking, I kind of like, yeah, I know that. Talking to you, I was blown away. I go, holy crap, where'd you come up with that? That's great. And you had so many good ideas. And the best thing I liked about it was you were just more than happy to share that information, which, I really gravitate towards people that are more than happy to share their information because, it's that give forward person or mentality and stuff. So I think first thing if you want, let's kind of talk about, the book that you did write and kind of the premise behind it, which is Shift, which is obviously about the trigger events where things happen. And that's kind of where our conversation started over lunch that one day. So can you give kind of a high level on what Shift is and the process and methodology behind it?
So the way this all came about was for about 20 years, I was just this lucky sales guy. I was in the right place, the right time, and stuff just happened. The hard part was for 20 years it happened, and I was so busy taking advantage of the fact it was happening, I didn't understand why it really happened. And then in the summer of 2002, it stopped. And I spent that month of afternoons in August of 2002 reflecting on 20 years of success. And I figured out 3 things. The first thing I figured out is that when I'm out there selling, the people I'm trying to get to become my customers are always in one of 3 different, what I call buying modes. First one's called status quo, so happy, not looking to change. The other end of the spectrum are those who are unhappy and doing something about it. And what I realized, one of my first 3 epiphanies, was there's something in between, which is someone who's unhappy but hasn't gotten to this problem yet. And what I realized is every single 6, 7, 8-figure deal that I could remember over that almost 20 years, every single time I got to somebody in the middle. So that was my first epiphany. And that took me a couple of weeks to figure it out. And then I had to think, well, hang on a second, there's a problem with that. The problem is, how do I understand, how does someone go from being in status quo, happy and not looking on Monday, being in the window of dissatisfaction, unhappy but still not looking on Wednesday, and be searching for alternatives, unhappy and doing something about it on Friday? And I then reflected again on that almost 20 years of success, and that's when I figured out there was a very specific sequence of events that move people between these different modes. And that was my second epiphany. My third epiphany was that for the first time in 20 years, I didn't do what my sales manager said. Now, for the most part, I kind of did what I wanted anyway, but I still listened on a regular basis, and the story they always told was if you lose the business, you never lose the lesson. But that's not what I'd done. For the first time in 20 years, I'd analyzed the business I had won instead of the business I had lost. So I was curious because I figured, okay, there must be a bunch of research on this process. So out of curiosity, I went to Google and I typed between quotes the word sales and analysis. So those 2 words in that order together. And I found about 1 million pages on the internet. I then did a search for what my sales managers had always taught me, this law sales analysis, again, between quotes. And I found about 50,000 pages on the internet. But that's not what I had done. I said, let's go look for the phrase WON sales analysis. So WON sales analysis together in that order. The summer of 2002, I was really surprised when I went to Google and I typed in that phrase. I found only 2 pages on the internet that talked about how to replicate your biggest wins by analyzing what made you win. And that's kind of what started this whole thing. And that's really what the first 3 chapters of the book are about, those 3 pieces. And the last 4 chapters are basically what I did for 20 years to be able to learn of those events and then capitalize them when they happened.
That's intriguing that back in the day, that sort of stuff wasn't there. And just for people's reference, when you put it in quotes, right? So, I mean, a lot of people are smart, but when you put a search in quotes, it puts those words together specifically, obviously. So it further refines your search down as opposed to having just nothing there in quotes when you're searching on Google. So that's how you came about with the whole process. Now, trying to map that process out, I'm sure took a bit of time, and trying to get it one from your brain down into a book format. So I'm sure it went through numerous iterations, right? And then obviously you get into this point where there's trigger events that start putting these things in place. And how do I map those out? How'd you go through that sort of process?
So the process of writing the book, here's something I recognized a long time ago. I'm the world's second worst typer, second worst speller, second worst writer. So you put those 3 things together with a guy who's 50 who, of course, has old eyes, and it's a big problem. So my idea was pretty simple. All I was going to do was host 7 different webinars. And every webinar was a chapter in the book. The idea then being I would take the recordings, have them transcribed, and then work with a writer to have the transcriptions turned into a book. And basically that's the process that I went through. So it went through several iterations. One of the interesting things about the book is I have taught this for years at entrepreneurship schools and dealt with a lot of big businesses. And funnily enough, in the writing of the book, I realized that I had the 7 chapters in the wrong sequence. And I actually had to change the sequence of the book. So when I sort of did a rewrite, which would have been the fall of 2009, which was my second attempt at getting this book out, I had to change the order and then, of course, rewrite a whole bunch of the book with the help of a writer. And then, so I had a writer, I had an editor, I had a proofreader. I gave it to like 20 different people to make sure there are no mistakes. And still, in spite of that, page 11 I think was in the book. And if you go get the hard copy, the printed version, I think you'll find the word exactly is spelt wrong because it's in all caps and spell checker didn't find it. And none of the almost 100 people that read it noticed the mistake.
Yeah, actually, when I was over at Indigo, that was the first thing I honed in on.
Yeah, Chris is the master of spelling, obviously.
So I'm actually I'm number one. If you're number two, I'm number one.
There's that ego again.
That'll help you out. That'll help you out. So the process, obviously, it's intriguing. Two things. One thing you said earlier was I think it was the summer 2002. You said something stopped. It was basically like, did you stop and take a step back and look, or was it you were not getting the sales coming through because of certain things? What was that?
Good question. So what happened was the day before 9/11, I joined a new company. And for all of those that you were trying to sell in a post 9/11 environment, it was almost impossible. But I joined a brand new company, and like always happens, I got lucky, and within 6 months, I'm the number one sales guy in the entire country. Unfortunately, it's a company called WorldCom. And if anybody remembers, I think like 21 days after I become the number one sales guy in the entire country, they admit to conducting $11 billion in accounting fraud, and now nobody wants to buy from me. So that was sort of my own little trigger around, okay, I need to reflect on successes and figure out what worked, because for whatever reason, what I'd done for almost 20 years stopped working.
Yeah.
And it turns out most of it was related to my employer, but that was the
out
process
of your control.
Totally out of your control, right? Or out of my control.
Yeah.
Right?
That's a reboot.
That's a total reboot, and it's actually cool
man.
because that actually became the starting point of the whole idea for this business. And when I realized that there were these events going on, I did some research, and I found out, I think there was like 3 million B2B salespeople in North America. I did some surveys of successful salespeople and VPs of sales, and I figured out that every single one of those salespeople knows of about $1 million worth of stuff their customers want, but it's not related to what they sell.
Right.
So they're aware of all these triggers for things that aren't theirs. And that's when I said, hey, I'll just create this information exchange. So sort of like an eBay for sales leads. That was my $1 billion idea. And
I thought it was shift selling.
No. So that the stuff that behind the scenes that makes this $1 billion idea work was the same stuff that's in shift selling. But what happened was nobody else really knew about these events. So even with the money, it was a big educational play, and that was the challenge that we encountered. It was going to take a lot longer to make this whole thing work.
Yeah.
And what happened to me was a big personal event was I became a dad. And I promised my wife and myself, I'm not going to be a successful entrepreneur with a ruined marriage and dysfunctional kids. So when I moved down to California to collect $1 million, my wife, who plays French horn here, she had to stay here, and I'm commuting back and forth every other weekend. So the second I found out that she was pregnant, I had to go to the guy that gave me the $1 million and tell him, I'm going to be a dad. I got to go home.
Everything's changed.
Everything's changed, right? There was another one of my events or triggers. But it's interesting because if you think about this, and we'll talk about some business-to-consumer type examples of these triggers, but that's a classic example of what drives people to change. So from what I have been told, the birth of a child is the number one thing that drives more people to buy life insurance than every other single event combined.
Yes.
And you have the event of having a kid. So what happens? You change where you live. You buy a new car, right? You get insurance, you get a will, all this stuff based upon that single event. So for any business that can figure out these events, there's all these opportunities just from one single event or two events they figure out.
Yeah.
Right?
So how would someone figure? Do you say map out a process or a profile of somebody that says this is the stuff that would trigger these sort of things, right? That would, like you say, buying life insurance would be kind of one of those things. I have a kid. Life change, boom. Or even if you use a divorce, same sort of thing. Now all of a sudden I need to get a lawyer. B, I need to figure out where I'm going to live now. C, blah blah blah, all that stuff, right? Like that's. So would you recommend to companies that if they want to target an ideal client and then figure out what those trigger events are, just say this is Mary, who is 34 years old and has just become divorced or just become a mom or whatever, and here's all the things she's looking for. Would that be a process?
So that's a process, but here's the way that I start the process. The way I start the process in the book, and anybody can go download the template with instructions. You just go to windowofdissatisfaction.com, And what happens is, what I get you to look at is just make a list of the last 10 or 15 wins that you've got. And there are some characteristics of these wins when you got to someone in the window of dissatisfaction. They happen fast. People make decisions without talking to the competition. They're referenced. People are glad to be a reference. They pay a higher price. There's certain characteristics about these businesses or these opportunities. And what you want to do first is you want to figure out, of all the business I won, how many had these characteristics? And then once you've got that list of those that had the characteristics, you want to pick up the phone or go meet the people you actually made the sale with, and you want to ask them some very simple questions. So that's part of this other piece I call the One Sales Analysis. So I own this domain name, One Sales Analysis, WON salesanalysis.com, and it gets probably 2,000 or 3,000 hits a month. Just because people are now thinking about, how do I analyze my wins to replicate my wins? So once you've figured out who the customers you want to replicate, so they're big deals, happen fast, they don't complain about price, and they're willing to be a reference. So you identify
WON analysis?
WON sales analysis. But I may or may not own also the domain name One Analysis. If I don't, as soon as I get finished here, I'm going to go buy it.
Yep.
I'm already ahead of you, Craig. I got it all. I'll sell it to you for
because here's one of the things I've also done. What I've learned to do is protect all the intellectual property that I had created. So if you go to the internet and type by mistake One Sales Analysis as in ONE, it comes to my website. The number one, it comes to my website. You type in Law Sales Analysis, it comes to my website. So I'm a big believer that a lot of business, even though it's inspired by triggers, is created by word of mouth. So somebody tells somebody else about this One Sales Analysis, and no matter how you misspell it, you're going to come to my website. So I own almost 300 domain names related to what I teach.
Wow. So you...
Yeah, actually, you know, Craig, when I first met you, it was funny because the guy Kawasaki was talking, and he was talking about Troomers, which was the social media site that he set up that actually was a kind of, I think, probably the precursor to Alltop, which he created. And he went through the process where he said they came up with a name, and then they went and literally, I think they went and took 1,000 domain names or something that were somewhat similar to it, so that they would have everything all encompassing under that blanket, right? So good idea on that
Absolutely.
one. So. Kirsten, are you showing the site up by any chance?
Well, I had it up. Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
Oh, okay. Just check it.
So there's, I think what's really important for the audience to understand is there's really 3 reasons to own those domain names. First of all, you want to make it really easy for someone to find you. Second of all, you want to make it really hard for someone to copy you or steal the market you're trying to create. Third of all, at some point when I'm finished with this business and I want to sell it, or someone makes me a ridiculous offer, I'll sell them, you know, the customer list and the IP and all the rest of that stuff. That'll be an amount. I don't know whether it's $1 million or $5 million, whatever. But then what I'll sell them separately is all those domain names, because they just spent a bunch of money to buy something. They'll spend as much to prevent the competition from replicating what I just sold them.
Excellent. By the way, you just gave away your little secret there. I think whoever wants to negotiate with you may try to throw those domains in, and but that's okay.
That's okay, man.
I like the transparency. It also helps in the sales process.
Excellent. So obviously you've got all these little trigger events. So organizations can walk through your process, or a salesperson can walk through your process and figure out these triggers. I think one of the things that I found intriguing about what you were doing and is that one trigger event can actually set off several trigger events, right? So if one person moves from a job, guess what? They're moving to a job, and someone's coming into that job, and on either sides of that side, then you could go out another layer or 2 and potentially have 7 potential opportunities that fit in there. Can you explain that process that you explained to us? And I still go, wow, that's just brilliant.
So here's what I figured out. So between these different buying modes, so status quo, window of dissatisfaction, searching for alternatives. Between the status quo and the window of dissatisfaction is an event that makes somebody want to change. So they're thinking about it, but they're not doing anything about it yet. These are the times you want to get in front of someone, help them, define the problem, design the solution, and start developing the relationship. But even if you do that, that's not enough. They have to have a second event where they can afford to change. Either they can afford the time or the money. And then the next event that comes after that is they have to be able to justify the event. So I looked at these events that made people want to change. And what are the events that create the best opportunities? Well, it turns out a change in decision makers. So you got a decision maker who is involved in a process to choose a vendor or a solution of some sort. Doesn't matter if it works or not. Their ego and their reputation is tied to that solution. And it's not until that person leaves that somebody new comes in and takes their place and says, whoa, this is busted. We got to tear this out and do something different.
And they're taking a lot of those pieces with them. So that new person is sitting there pretty much with an empty desk.
With an empty desk.
Yeah.
Right? But here's what happens. So there's a couple of opportunities. So first of all, if this person was an ally or a friendly, if their email address bounces because you've got them on a mailing list or they subscribe to your blog, what happens with most organizations, they move the email address bounces. People take that person's name off the list. And they do nothing else. I'm thinking, hang on a second. Take that bounced email, hand it to your best sales rep and say, here's a bunch of opportunities. And here's how that works. So the guy or gal who was there, where did they go? If they were a friend or an ally, follow them.
Yeah.
Even if they weren't, odds are they're still more likely to buy from you now because they were stuck with the old solution. They could not admit they were wrong. They go somewhere new. They know they made a mistake, and they're open to doing things differently. The person that takes their place. So what I love about when someone leaves, and for most salespeople or consultants, business owners, whatever, you get a small chunk of business from somebody, but you want more. And you try to convince the guy or gal you're doing business with to give you a chance to get more. You want to get introduced to their boss to figure out what's the big problem they've got. You can help. But the problem is they won't let you go above their head. And if you do go above their head, what happens is they get pissed off, they cut you off, and you end up with nothing.
There's an ego play.
There's an ego play.
Yeah.
Well, now that guy or gal is gone. Now you can talk to their boss, and there's no repercussions.
Ah, so you're actually mining the entire division at that
At that
pivotal
point, I'm now
moment.
going, okay, I've done this. I want a bigger piece of the pie. I want to move farther up their organization where someone has more money, more authority, and more influence.
So conceivably, there's a group of people in the company that you've seen the change. There's a group of people in the company that took on that employee where he moved on to.
Yeah.
And then there's the past.
There's the past. So I get to go talk to their boss, which means
You
I
have
get
like an army of people that you can talk to.
well, and here's the thing. That organization that wouldn't let you in before, the guy or gal that takes your place is now, on average, 10 times more likely to become your customer. So who wouldn't want to go farm leads where someone's 10 times more likely to become your customer? So I'm a big fan of going talking to the person who left, talk to their boss. So you then have greater influence over the person that comes in. And someone new comes into their job, and you get a chance to go see them. There's really only one question you need to ask when you get started. And the very first question I think you should ask is, where did you come from? Because that organization has also had a change, and they're now 10 times more likely to become your customer. Now, you could stretch this out if you want.
And that's actually an easy question when you think about it. It's like, I'd like to be able to help you out. Where did you come from? Like, what were some of your basics when you started prior to this? And then they open up easily, don't they?
Yeah, and here's the thing. And if they don't tell you, it's easy to find out.
Yeah.
You just go on LinkedIn and bring up their profile, and it'll tell you where they were before.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It's pretty easy.
Yeah. It's amazing.
That could be that kind of perpetual. That's a perpetual motion machine right there. You just keep going back and forward and all over the place, right? And
Here's something that I find interesting. So I have U.S. Census data. I don't have Canadian Census data, but U.S. Census data says that 3% of the people change jobs every single month. So imagine you find a way to build a mailing list of 500 people. And of those 500 people, every single month, 15 people change jobs.
Yep.
So 15 people change jobs, 3 opportunities for every job change. That's 45 opportunities. That's 2 new opportunities every single day for a sales rep or a business owner. Just by following bounce emails.
And also with guys that are 10 times more open to actually change, right? Boy, that's a nice little pool to be fishing into.
And this actually is one of the reasons why I'm a big fan of things like webinars.
Yeah.
So you get a chance to do a webinar. I did one last week, had 1,800 people sign up for a webinar. You take those 1,800 people, you put them on a mailing list, a bunch of them bounce every month.
It's that whole lead capture opportunity, and they have a connection with you. So you just keep following up with them, give them at least some connection to that original webinar, a picture or something, so they know who you are. Be a part of their lives in kind of a backseat kind of way, right? It was interesting because, through your inspiration, we were doing these events, right? And I was thinking of interviewing anyone who's in a new position
Yep.
and saying, hey, I'd like to interview you, and I'll give you the interview, and then you can use that to promote yourself in your new organization. And that your whole concept inspired me to look at that as an option. I mean, there must be a dozen different ways to approach this. But what's the way that you do it? Like
so I like to just pick up the phone. I'm an old-fashioned guy. So some people are, what's the word I want to use? So let's not be shy. I'm going to call them cowards. Okay, they won't pick up the phone. Pick up the phone. Ask. What's the worst thing that happens? They say no. If they say no, they didn't say never. They just said not now.
Right.
So I just pick up the phone, and even if it's someone who hasn't had an event that you know of, sometimes there's stuff that goes on behind the scenes. So if you've got somebody that you want to sell to, who's got money, authority, and influence, pick up the phone. Call them once a month to just go, hey, Kirsten, Craig here. I'm just calling to see if anything happened since we last spoke that makes what I do more affordable, more relevant, or more important. And if they tell you there's been an event, you're off to the races. If not,
don't worry about it.
Hey, but here's the thing. What's interesting is just the whole idea of following up with someone on a monthly basis. There's this level of, what do I call it? I'm a big fan of some of Charlie Green's work. And Charlie Green says there are two factors that make salespeople the best there are. So the best salespeople really have two things. One, intimacy. So they have this ability to have a relationship with somebody that goes beyond just business, and they'll open up. But the other thing is reliability. So just the fact that I'm phoning every month to follow up with somebody, my competition doesn't have the same set of reliability. Most customers are risk averse. As soon as they want something, they go, that guy Craig, he always calls me back. He calls me every month. He cares about me, right? He's always willing to listen. That's the guy I want to do business with.
Everyone has an innate need for belonging, don't they?
Yeah.
I mean, that's what it is.
The actual interesting thing, I've got some stats against this, and I'm going to have to pull them up my head. I don't know whether they're accurate or not, but I'm going to use it. What is it? I think it's 7 times. You have to touch someone 7 times in order to have a sale. And that's for a $35,000 sale. And the average salesperson contacts a person once. And the odds of sales happening, and in fact, it gets down to 6% of salespeople will contact people after the 4th time. So only 6% of the salespeople get access to 60% of the actual sales that happen. So 1 out of every 10 sales these people will get. Whereas the flip side is, 94% of sales reps go after 40% of the business, right? So it's key element to what you're saying is the follow-up factor on this one is being in touch. Now, I also know, Craig, that you have a process, and I'm not going to get you to give that away, but part of that process behind this is when you contact these guys, it's educational in nature, right? It's like, I'm not calling to tell you that I'm selling you anything, but here's something I want to give you as food for thought, if I'm not mistaken. So can you kind of elaborate on that? You don't have to do a process today because
I'm not worried.
It's a great process.
I'll give it away because here's the thing. What I've learned is that if people don't have money and have time to themselves, they'll do it on their own. But as soon as they have an event where they don't have the time to do it, now they're interested. And then when they don't have time and do have money, well, then they become my customers. So here would be an example. Let's pretend, so I'll give you my own personal example. So anybody else who's got a book and is targeting an audience, here would be something you might want to use. So you got a VP of sales who's new in their job. So I would pick up the phone and go, hey, Kirsten, Craig here. I'm not calling to sell you anything. I've got a book that won an award as one of the top sales books of 2010. Would love to get you a copy. Would you like a copy? Sure. So I give them a link to go download a copy of the book. And I say, can I follow up next week to see if you've had a chance to read the book? And they'll go, sure. So I follow up next week and I say, hey, Kirsten, it's Craig here. Have you had a chance to read the book yet? And they'll go, no, I'm too busy. And I'll go, great. Well, would you like a link to a video that's 20 minutes long that explains the entire book? Kirsten says, that's a great idea. So I send the email with the link. Now, I use a little bit of marketing automation so I know if Kirsten goes there.
Yep.
But what happens is I ask again, can I follow up next week to see if you've had a chance to watch the video? They'll go, sure. I'll follow up next week. Kirsten, have you had a chance to watch the video?
No, I haven't seen it yet.
Too busy. I can't get there. And I go, well, would you like me to explain the entire book in 10 minutes? And Kirsten's going to say yes. Yeah. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, well, how about now?
Yeah.
Because I'm not going to push off till later. How about now? So I take 5, 7, 10 minutes, explain the entire book. Yeah. Kirsten likes what he hears. he goes and watches the video. He likes what he sees. He fills in the form. He goes and downloads the book.
He rolls all the way back.
He rolls all the way back. He likes what he reads and says, okay, my sales guys need this. How soon can you get here? So that multiple touch piece. I'm a big fan of threes, because if you can get sales momentum, it's threes. Now, the difference between my 3 and Chris's 7 is this. My perspective is that there are 2 pieces related to that 7 touch piece. One of which is there has to be this establishment of credibility or trust. So you can do that in 3 or 4 touches. The problem is, for most people, is there's been no event. So even after that trust has been established, the reason it's called 4, 5, 6, or 7 is you have to wait until an event has happened until they want to become your customers.
Right.
So if you knew of those events and could dispense with those last 3 or 4 calls and just focus on the 3 that matter and wait until someone wants what you sell, then you can make it happen a whole lot faster.
You're accelerating it.
You're accelerating. You're shortening your cycle on average from typically about 9 months to less than 90 days.
And you're cutting all the wasted phone calls to people that are just, it's just going to be a repeat call. Now, and those are just averages, those 7 touches. I mean, some of them might be 15 touches, and then the others might be 2, right?
And the ones that are 2 were those that had an event and you got there at exactly the right time. The ones that were 15, you had to wait forever for them to have an event.
Yeah.
So obviously, if I look at your process here, okay, so once again, brilliance on this aspect, right? I'm dealing with guys that have changed. They're 10% or 10 times more likely to actually either listen or be open to change, and obviously be way more open if it makes sense and it can actually empower me quicker. And then on top of it is I'm positioning myself as kind of a industry expert. Now, I mean, you're lucky in your case. You've got a book that has won an award, and you can position yourself. So you automatically, that's the credibility that comes in the door. Let's say the average Joe sales rep doesn't have, say, what you and I have, where we've actually contributed to good books and you've written a book. Would you recommend something like write a white paper or pull something together or have a webinar that you've actually done before that can serve as that piece of that nugget of information?
It's also the credibility that comes with the book, right? So I mean, this person's serious because they spent time, money, effort creating a book, and they're critically acclaimed, right?
And gets recognized.
Yeah.
So that's a good question. So how can you establish credibility? So I think there's 3 forms of credibility. First one is relationship credibility. So you've known someone for a long time, you have that credibility. There is expertise credibility. So if you become an expert about how you apply, let's say, software to getting paid faster, then people want to learn about how do they get paid faster. So develop some expertise for yourself, but then there's this thing called leverage credibility. So the whole idea is you probably have inside your own organization experts of some sort that your customers would like to be able to pick the brains of, leverage their credibility. I think most salespeople don't spend enough time taking their CEO or VP of sales out on calls with their customers. Their customers would love to pick the brains of the president, the VP of finance, whoever. Drag those people out on calls. That starts the relationship building process, gives you the relationship credibility, and you're off to the races.
And Chris, you did that with suppliers, didn't you?
Yeah, actually, it was when I worked with Ackland's Granger, or WW Granger of the U.S. If anyone's viewing in from Granger here, national account manager for them. And what I found really worked is, Granger has 60,000 products they have on their shelf, and I'm not going to learn all those. I don't have the time to learn about all that stuff. So I would just grab someone from Kimberly-Clark or DeWalt or any of these big manufacturers, take them down and let them do the pitch to the purchasers, the buyers, the supply chain managers, and let them just basically sell for me. And I doubled the business of the organization in my accounts within 1 year in existing accounts, just from doing it, and I hate the term, working smarter than harder. And no, I mean, that's you leverage those experts, and then they trust you.
And you're actually showing your clients that you're serious. Like, this is not, you're not just going in to shake their hands and shaking hands, kissing babies. There's some serious business there if there's somebody of authority showing up for that call, obviously.
Yeah, so my story is similar to Chris. I took over Western Canada for an organization, and we shifted our focus from trying to get all the customers ourselves. We were a distributor. We had like 400 different vendors on a line card. Let's go build awesome relationships with those vendors. So right now the vendor has a preferred relationship with a competitive distributor. Something happens, they get pissed off, they leave. We became their first choice. If you get pissed off at the current distributor of choice, come to us next. And I think we doubled business in like 18 months. Entire Western Canadian branch, 18 months, 100% growth, just by taking advantage of that leverage credibility.
There's all these little things that you can do. Hey, I want to shift a bit of the focus here, especially around social media, because that was some of the stuff that you and I had talked about with Kirsten a while back. And I mean, it's I always look at if you do stuff in the real world and also in the online world. In the online world, social media. I'm a stats guy at heart, so social media is roughly 20-22% of website traffic out there. The rest of it is typically, search engine driven SEO process, stuff like that, or just general knowledge and awareness of an organization. But obviously social media is picking up steam and always will be an element there. What's your take? What do you like about social media? What's some of the sort of things? What are little tips and tricks that you might have out there that you utilize? Give me your thoughts on social media.
Yeah, so it's interesting. I didn't realize something for a while. What had happened to me was, as I started writing the book and was asked to go speak, people would go Google this guy named Craig Elias. It turned out that there was a Craig Elias in Pittsburgh that went on a drinking binge one night, killed a buddy, threw him off a bridge.
Nice.
So people are Googling Craig Elias, and there's this guy. And I'm going, okay, I got to get rid of this guy. Because the old-fashioned SEO was, how do you get to number one?
Yeah.
Get to number one, get to number So, or even get in the top 10. For me, at that point, I realized it wasn't get on the top 10. It was be the top 10 or be the top 20, be the top 30. So for me, I started leveraging things like Facebook pages, Twitter, SlideShare, all these other places we could create a profile. So if someone was looking for Craig Elias, my stuff would show up. So you go look for Craig Elias today, and you might find this guy from Pittsburgh, depending upon what day of the week it is. He might be on page 3, 4, or 5.
Yeah.
Or else everyone's going, hey, that guy from Pittsburgh.
And they feel sorry for him when it's minus 35 outside, like it was last night, right? So that's sort of how I came at social media. And what's interesting for me now is Google has jumped on the bandwagon. Google now has this whole thing called the 0 moment of truth. And it's all about when someone's thinking about changing, they have a stimulus, or in my world I call that a trigger. They're thinking about changing, they go to search for something. How do you find a way to make sure that you're found? So video is a big thing these days. YouTube is, from what I'm told, the second most busy search engine or second busiest search engine on the internet. So put some videos up on YouTube. Someone goes and looks for your name, there you are. Or in my case, trigger event selling, there I am. When Google started coming out with this whole 0 moment of truth, I said, hang on a second, I can leverage this to be able to get in some large corporation. So I wrote a blog post about 0 moment of truth and selling. And I went and got a bunch of domain names that related to that. But the funny thing is, 45 minutes after I wrote my blog post, I got a phone call from someone who did a search for ZMOT and selling. My stuff showed up 1 and 2, so above Google's own stuff. Just because I had harnessed the power of social media to be able to position myself way up the list.
Yeah, they're not pushing you down like they are Twitter right now.
They're not. No. So, and here's the thing: if they want the domain names, they can pick up the phone and call me and say, "Hey, I want those domain names." They can have them. That'll allow me to foster a relationship, get on their radar screen. If I can do stuff with Google, there's my leverage credibility.
Absolutely.
Right? There are some large Fortune 500 corporations that are big fans of the 0 moment of truth. So what I decided to do was put together a group, a consortium, and we're going to get started in February. 7 subject matter experts are going to apply their own stuff related to B2B selling for the 0 moment of truth, and we're going to become the de facto group to go get to. And we're going to use social media as a way to put us on the first 1, 2, 3 pages of any result, whether it's Yahoo, Microsoft, Bing, rather, I guess,
all of them.
or Google. And so far, anywhere you go, we're, for the most part, already 4 or 5 of the top 10. We haven't even started.
It's amazing. We did the same thing. I think I told you the story about Steve Schiffman when we interviewed him, and literally within probably a day, 2 days, a week, or whatever, Kirsten and I had was it 8 of the top 10 spots on the first page for his book, and the only one that beat us was Amazon, and we actually beat Steve Schiffman. He was in spot number 10, and we had 2 through 8 on this one, right? And we almost pushed him right off the page. We pushed McGraw-Hill, who we have a close relationship, right off the page. So, But I noticed you talk about SlideShare. And you know me, I jump around. I got ADD, I think, and I jump around. But SlideShare's got to be one of my most favorite little tools, one of the most favorite underutilized tools on the web right now. That and Prezi. I don't know if you've noticed or if you even have a Prezi account. Prezi takes precedence sometimes on a lot of things. So if people, this is just a little tip here, if people create a presentation, they got the good title and they've also got the description done properly, Prezis show up in rankings. And somehow or other, I think that has to do with the guy who did TED, created TED, actually created Prezi as well. So I think there's some sort of maneuvering in there that the search engines think whoever created that obviously is a smart guy. But there's tools, so we can talk outside of Twitter and Facebook. I mean, those are the big powerhouses, right? What do you think are some of the nicer, smaller ones that aren't really as leveraged?
Well, that's a good question. Let me go back to LinkedIn for a second because I'm a big fan of LinkedIn.
Sure.
So even just creating a LinkedIn group. So I created a group called Zmod Selling on LinkedIn. Same thing. 45 minutes later, there it was. In fact, I think if you use Bing or Yahoo and do a search for Zmod Selling, it's my LinkedIn page that shows up first.
Yeah. Well, and it seems to be I heard the term interestingness is what Google likes to see,
okay.
Right? So if you have content, and obviously Shift Selling and a lot of the material has backlinks to it and a lot of traffic already, and you kind of connect all of this interesting material together, that's what Google will put you higher on the rankings for, right? I think that's part of the reason why we do with the video as Shiftmen is, we had all that information, but we also had a pile of other information relevant to sales, marketing, and everything of the topics, right? But if it's a topic of interest, it will get noticed. If it's unique, it'll get noticed. And if you have multiple areas where people can find that information, it all kind of connects together. Is that what you're saying? That kind of drives your results.
Yeah, so here's something I don't know if this works or not, but what I try to do on my own website is that I will take a link. So if I'm writing a blog post and I want to give a link to my own template, which is in the One Sales Analysis, rather than giving the link to the internal website, I will give the link to the external website, which then goes out and brings traffic right back in. So that may help. Loops back onto the website. So from an external perspective, so I don't know if that gets counted differently. What I love about blogging is if you blog correctly and you tag a post in certain ways, every time you create a tag, it creates a new page on your website, which then has new content, and Google says, hang on a second, you now have all these pages, because now I have all these tags, so I do something with Jeffrey Gitomer, tag Jeffrey Gitomer. Anytime I mention somebody or include a resource in something, I include that tag. And having more pages for my website, again, drives my ranking up.
Gets me
found. But I think Chris's question was sort of smaller plays that are worthwhile from a...
Maybe address that.
Yeah, so here's a strategy that I have thought of and executed very well. And again, most of the time I just consider myself lucky. And when I get lucky, I go repeat, repeat, repeat. So for me, what I started doing was commenting on popular blog posts. So I'll find a blog that's very popular, and it's pretty simple to go find the top 25 sales blogs or whatever. So I found a blog post, gets a ton of traffic. I watch it, I read it. When I get a chance, I will add a comment. I will point to a resource that's relevant, that's external, and then I'll point to a resource that is mine. So this One Sales Analysis, on one occasion, a guy named Jeffrey James wrote a blog post about how to outsell everybody, and I posted a comment on his blog.
Supporting it.
And then giving a link to something that was mine that drags them back to my website. A relatively famous author saw it, filled in the form. So I'm a big fan when someone fills in a form of following up on MIT did some research, says 5-minute follow-up gets you 100 times more likely to talk to the person than if you wait just 30 minutes to follow up. So I phone this guy up. We have this conversation. Next thing you know, he's talking about the fact he likes my content. He sends an email to his entire list. And I had 300 people filled in the form in like 24 hours. And then a few weeks later, he wrote a blog post about the exact same thing. And I had 250 more fill it in again within the week. And I, almost on a daily basis, page 66 of his book, he talks about this cool thing called the One Sales Analysis. Every single day I get people filling the form based upon them reading his book, coming to my website, doing the analysis, and then they go buy my book. So one single form fill.
Yeah. But, I mean, how often does this happen? Is this a lot of work for you?
So I don't think it's all that much work. You simply pick a few popular blogs. You go, oh, I'm going to find a way to follow these, whether it's through RSS or email. You find something that's interesting or relevant. You comment, put something in, drive them back to your website.
Yeah.
It's like 20 minutes a day.
Okay.
And the nice thing is you want to go find those websites. I guess you would find a ranking against something like Alexa to see where it might rank, and if it's someone that gets like 5 hits a day and you think, hey, it's a good looking site, I might get a lot. It's instead what you want to do is, here's one that I know they're getting a whole bunch of traffic, and that builds up more street cred with Google and search engines.
That's a good question. I wrote about this a little while ago, and I forget which. I just did a presentation, but I want to. If you just go and type into Google, if either one of you wants to do this while we're on the phone, just type into Google top 25 sales bloggers or top 25 sales websites, and you'll get to a page I think is owned by something called INVESP or something of that nature. But basically, they give a list of top 25 sales blogs. Just tell me what comes up. So we'll do this real time.
A list of top 50 sales blogs by rank. Jonathan Farrington.
So what's the first one? The first result you get.
First result is a list of the top 50 blogs by blog rank.
So click on that link, and it takes you to what's the?
I'm searching Calgary location.
There you go. So you're at the right website. What's the main URL for that? Get rid of the top 25. So how do I
INVESP.com.
Yeah, INVESP / and it's say blog rank. What's the next
one?
Blog rank.
Blog dash rank.
Yeah, blog dash rank. And you can look this up at any topic, and it'll tell you the top 25 or 50 blogs for any topic you want.
Oh wow,
that's good.
Okay, so now your process behind this then is just look, listen, get some, maybe even set up Google alerts on these things or an RSS feed, and just kind of take a quick boo at these things every morning when you wake up and say, is there an article on any of these things that would cause me to actually write something smart against?
And the other thing that I do, a part of my 20 minutes a day, is I do a search for my own terms, and I see if anybody's written a blog post around this. And then, so there are some people that, what do I want to call them? Lack of a better term, unfriendlies, okay? So I might not be able to comment on their blog, but they will take the exact same post and comment on it somewhere else. So on a lot of these aggregate blogs, and I'll then comment on the aggregated blog. So I have some copycats who I can't go counter what they say on their own blog, but they go to someone like Customer Think or something else, and they post the exact same content. I then can go add my piece, and then what happens is their blog post goes up and talks about something, and then I get to add my 10 cents worth.
You get to tie in, and then it connects back.
That's an interesting tactic. By the way, there's another one you can use too. If you search, there's, and I forget how to do this. I found this on SlideShare. Google gives more credibility to .edu domains, and there's a way to search. I got to remember how to do it, but I know just by using one of the search functions, you can find all .edu domains that are related to sales or marketing or whatever that allow comments. And you can actually go in and put those comments in as well. You can add comments into these, and Google will take more precedence over those things than .coms or .cas or whatever it is that are out there as well. So that was just another little thing I can add to the conversation here.
Chris, what I want to do here, first of all, is notify everybody that's attending the webcast today and who's watching the recorded version. You can ask questions in the question form located to the side, and Craig is going to get those questions directly, either now through me or later on direct to his email. So if you do have questions and you'd like to engage Craig or your team, I think you answer your emails yourself.
I'll answer all my emails myself. Yeah.
Feel right ahead. I mean, you're connecting directly with the author of Shift Selling, and what better way to answer those questions? There was a question that came in. It was a little bit earlier on, and I couldn't exactly get to it because you guys were engaged in so much conversation. But it's regarding searching on LinkedIn, and how do you sift through all of the personal changes that occur in the job profiles?
So good question. There are a couple of different things you can use. So there is actually an iPhone or iPad app, which I think is called Job Change Alert, that does that on LinkedIn.
You can hold that up if you have it. But
I'll see if I can find it quickly.
Yeah.
So you can use that. Something else you can use, which I'm a big fan of, is there is a social CRM tool called Nimble. And what Nimble will do is it takes all that information and it understands what has changed, and it then tells you what to go do as a result of actually that happening. So it'll say, congratulate this person on a new job. Phone this person and say happy birthday, because it can tell you what it does. But let me see if I can find my So
Nimble, while you're doing that, go ahead.
So while you're doing that, it basically dumbs down the whole process for you, and it walks
dumbs down the whole process. So nimble.com. So here's one of the cool things about Nimble. It takes all your contacts and all your relationships from Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, Google Apps, Gmail, whatever you want, puts them all in one place.
Here's a nice number, $0 for a personal account.
So you can get a personal account for free. Okay? So that's something you can do. This is, I'll hold this up and see if people can see that. So the bottom, can they see that?
Yep.
So the bottom right-hand corner is Job Change Alert. That's a free app that you can get on your iPad. I don't know if it's also iPhone, but definitely on the iPad. And you simply open it up. It tells you about the job changes. This one's a little kind of convoluted because for some reason they show up twice. I don't understand why they show up twice.
It looks like a reverse yield sign. It looks like a okay. Huh.
So that's a cool tool. Nimble, I think, is awesome. You just input all your stuff into Nimble, and it tells you, phone this person, congratulate them on their job.
That's pretty sweet.
There's a couple more you told us about. Geist and also ICO.
Yeah, so Gist is another cool one. So what Gist also allows you to do the same thing, and it will scrape your inbox. And in fact, I also have Gist on my iPad. It's on the first page.
I installed Gist.
And what it also does, same sort of thing. It'll tell you about all these job changes. I had a scenario with a new VP of sales for a recruiting firm who'd heard my name from somebody else and called me in. And I hadn't had a chance to do any research, so I went to see him a couple of days later. I got to his office 5 minutes early, and I did some research on this guy, and I managed to, in the conversation, talk about some of the stuff that he had mentioned on Twitter. So, I put my family first. We talk a lot about stuff I do for my son. Well, funnily enough, he talked about loving car movies, being a fan of the Vancouver Canucks. His wife was in healthcare, and that every Saturday morning he gets up at 5:30 and takes his daughter to swimming lessons. So in this conversation, I was able to bring up things that we had in common, which kind of takes me back to Charlie Green's piece around intimacy and reliability. And intimacy, for me, is when you have the same thing in common with somebody else. So whether you share the same interests, golf, mountain biking, sailing, red wine, whatever. So T.A. McCann, the guy that started Gist, loves to sail, loves red wine, and he loves tech firms. So he's an awesome guy. And we have all these things in common. So when we chat, we could talk about stuff that's not just business related. So interests, the whole thing about putting my family first. So having conversations with John, who's the CEO of Nimble. He took a 6-year hiatus to raise his family. We have things in common from a values perspective. There's this connection that goes deeper than just interests. And the last thing for me is aspirations. When you have common aspirations, that's an even deeper connection from an intimacy perspective, intimacy. You'll share more with me because we have values and aspirations and interests, in common, not just our interests. So
do you fast track that, finding people that have similar interests in you, or is it just a question of standard social media and standard blog posts?
So here's, I think, what it's all about. So I think if you go to my LinkedIn profile, you'll see what it talks about, my values, my philosophies, and I forget what else it says in there. But that's all about helping people understand that about me first. So even if you go to Twitter, twitter.com/Craig Elias, it'll say, trigger event selling, $1 million prize winner, dadpreneur. So people get a sense of who I am. And what's interesting is this. For most people, the majority of their customers are about plus or minus 7.5 years their own age. So the first time I did this, I spoke at a conference for CEOs, and I put up there on my slide, dadpreneur. And people go, man, you did that? All these high-powered CEOs, they're going to write you off as a flake. Well, here's what happened. There were all these guys that were my age or older, 7.5, maybe sometimes 10 years, and they go, you know what? I wish I would have done what you're doing now because I'm divorced and don't have a great relationship with my wife, and my kids are kind of... So they went, if I can prevent you from going through what I went through, I just became your customer. So there's this emotional connection.
Yeah.
Then I found there was this audience that was my age and maybe 7 or 8 or 10 years younger. And they came to me and said, you know what, Craig, I'm doing the exact same thing that you do. So this is cool. If I ever get a chance, I'll become your customer, right? Because we have these things in common.
Yeah.
And I found all these 30-somethings who came to me and said, Craig, I don't get it. Can't you just get a nanny and go get a job? And my perspective is, we don't share anything in common. I don't want to waste time trying to get them as a customer.
Yeah.
That's the rest. And this is one of the things that worked for me as a salesperson. I'd rather be loved by some and hated by the rest than liked by everybody. Guy Kawasaki talks about this. You want to polarize the audience. Mm-hmm. So I simply go after the audience that's more likely to become my customer and let everybody else do their thing.
Yeah.
Right?
Brilliant. Well, we got like 6 different tips out of that question. Keep the questions coming, everyone. That's pretty good.
Hey, I got a question for you, because we're up onto about an hour.
Yeah,
here.
we want to wrap it up. We try to wrap these up in an hour.
But I mean, you're a big fan of webinars, obviously, right? And it sounds like you utilize it to also pull content and a whole bunch of things, create your book. Any recommendations for someone to use a webinar or a webcast, kind of like we do? I mean, we use these things nonstop as means to not only promote ourselves, but meet interesting people and get to influentials and stuff. How would someone get started? Let's say I'm a lonely sales rep in a company and I need to get started. A lot of people are scared to take that first step. What kind of recommendations would you have for someone to jump into doing a webinar?
So webinars are a little hard for individual salespeople. So let me talk about a corporation or an entrepreneur. Mm-hmm. And then if we can, we'll come back and talk about what can individual salespeople do to take advantage of this. So the idea is what most webinars are about. It's, hey, I'm going to put on a webinar. It's all about me. You're on my list. Come hear more about me. Well, the problem is they've heard all about you. They don't really care about you. So what do they care about? So what I started doing, how long ago now? I mean, when I was doing webinars about me, I would get 1, 2, 3, 4. I think one occasion I got lucky with a webinar with Jig, so I got 1,500 people that signed up. Mm. But for the most part, they're reasonably small, a couple hundred. And then I decided to make this shift, and what I decided to do was go find a technology partner who wanted some exposure. Right? I would then say, hey, I've got an idea for a webinar. You promote it. I'll promote it. I'll find a third speaker. All 3 of us promote it. All 3 of us get the list at the end and the recording. And all of a sudden, webinars went from being something that were 200, 300, or 400 people. I mean, I had one with 3,000 people signed up for a webinar. And on a regular basis, I will get 12, 15, 1,800 people sign up for a webinar because it's not just about me. My audience comes to hear about the other person. Their audience comes to hear about me.
You're crossing networks.
We're crossing this whole... And then here's the thing. I now have this list that I can use to promote the next webinar that's not about me. It's about the other speaker. All right?
Very
interesting.
Good
Craig, we should be doing some webinars together.
Well, it's kind of like Don Brown, so a guy you had in the past. Same thing. I said, here's something interesting. I picked up the phone. I called Don and said, hey, how about a webinar? Yeah. We'll find a way. We'll put 1,000 people on a call. The one I just did with Patrick Cahill, and Patrick, that last webinar is one of the best I've done. Mm-hmm. I went to Patrick a year and a half ago and said, here's an idea. You, me, on a webinar. I'll go find the sponsor. Okay, I know who it is. I won't mention them at this point because I love what they do, but I don't want to figure out that it took me a year and a half to make this happen. But I went to Patrick, and I simply found a way to get to the right people at the right time, had the right message. I went with the idea of doing one webinar. They said, well, we're not big fans of doing a webinar. They said, do you want to make it a series? And I said, hey, I can do 3 of those. And they wanted to pay me, but I don't want the money. So what they do instead is, above and beyond everything else I get, they give away 100 copies of my book to the people that attend the webinars.
So, and their gain is that they're sharing knowledge and they're building a relationship with their client base.
And what's happening is they would have a topic now that is relevant to someone that might not have been relevant before. Yep. So the topic for the first one we did, it's a series of 3, was how to make webinars your #1 lead generation tool. 42% of the people that showed up for the webinar weren't using webinars as a lead generation tool. They got this awesome prospecting list.
Yeah.
Right? I got all this exposure. The speaker got all this exposure. Yeah. We all became better fans and friends of what we do. We now look after each other when it comes to business. So find a way to do it with other people. Try to find a way to spread the wealth.
Guest speakers. And Chris and I learned that, 4 months in when we started doing these webcasts, that if you have guest speakers, well, first of all, we were getting tired of hearing ourselves talk. back and forth, but you're leveraging through their networks. You're giving them value. I mean, you don't charge for it. It's just like a quid pro quo scenario, right? When you have two strong networks that want to promote each other. You add a third?
Yeah.
Wow. That's pretty good.
I didn't think about the third, but for us, it was a little different. McGraw-Hill approached us, said, "Hey, I know you write a daily sales and marketing blog. Could you read some books and review them?" And then Kirsten and I kind of bantered it back and forth. So why don't we just interview these guys, right? And it's worked out perfect for me because if anyone reads my blog, to keep up daily, to get content going out on it is crazy. And it sinks. It takes too much time. So I leverage guys like you who have written a book where I'll take it and I'll promote you out to my audience on my blog, but I put it in snippets. Like today, I'll probably get a good 2 weeks of posts out of this.
Right? Well, and then you transcribe the video. Sorry, Chris.
But for me, it makes it kind of kills two birds with one stone, right? I get to leverage your smarts with my audience while promoting you to my audience at the same time, right? So sorry about the phone going in the background here, guys. But it works out. It works out really well.
Well, my suggestion here is you wanted to get out of here on the hour.
I need to, but let me do this. So here's an offer I'll make. So I'm on LinkedIn. I'm pretty easy to find.
Yeah.
Send me a LinkedIn connection request. Yeah. Okay. And
how do I know it's not the other guy?
Yeah, good thing. I don't think he's on. The other guy's on there. So if you can't find Craig Elias, just type in trigger events, and I'll be all over the place. So here's an offer I'll make. So send me that LinkedIn connection request, and once that's done, if you go to my website, go to Shift Selling, SHIFT, go to shiftselling.com/friends,
and that's what it looks like.
So shiftselling.com, you can go /friends. Yep. So you can misspell it, singularize it, shouldn't make a difference. It'll redirect you to a page where if you want, you can download the entire book. All I ask is, first of all, don't share with anybody else. Like, don't forward it to anybody else. And when you fill in the form, just tell me if you want the PDF version so you can open up an Adobe Acrobat, or if you have a Kindle and you want the electronic publication, I'll then manually email you the whole thing. I do it all manually. So if someone fills it in and they haven't sent me a LinkedIn connection request and I'm not friends, I don't send the book.
Yeah.
You can still get I'll send you the preview chapters automatically, but the manual piece is after the fact.
LinkedIn is the key.
LinkedIn first. Send me a LinkedIn connection request. And once I see we're friends on LinkedIn and I then go back and see you filled this in, I'll then send you the entire book.
That's fantastic. Great tip and really good content too. There's no doubt about it. Every time we talk with Craig, it's like the information flows.
I want to have you back on if you're willing to.
Well, and
actually, no. What I want to do is have a huge webinar with you and have like 10,000 people on. So.
Well, wait. So we got to go find the right people. So we need to find a third promoter in this whole process, right? Yeah. So who's got a product or a service that would also help us promote it? Because what we're talking about is relevant to them. So it's like with Gist. What I did with T.A. McCann was when I met TA at Dreamforce back in I think December 2010. I said, "You've got an awesome tool. I have a guy that endorsed my book, Keith Ferrazzi. I think we should have a 3-way webinar, and we'll get all these people that signed up. We had 2,000 people sign up for a webinar. Right? Wow, you just have to match the content to some sort of service, to 3 audiences, to some service provider, and then they'll say, "Hey, great, I'm in, and let's all go make it work."
Cool.
The key is that they're.
I'm all over doing that. If you're up,
we're all over it.
We'll find a way.
Well, I think that's great. Thanks for joining, everyone. If you have any more questions, I didn't get to all of the questions here. We have to actually wrap it up here. I did throw a couple in earlier, but at this point we're on the hour. So thanks for joining.
You know what, Kirsten? One last plug. Craig, why don't you just give your website away again one last time?
Actually,
so
the book as well.
Yeah. So the book is triggerbook.com. And if you want to go to the website where I blog generally once a month. What I do is I create series of 7 posts. So top 7 sales mistakes, top 7 ways to use social media, top 7 sales 2.0 tools, top 7 ways to do sales and marketing alignment. I'm about to do top 7 ways to apply Google's Zero Moment of Truth or ZMOT to B2B selling. And then in the fall, I'll start my list of the top 7 lead sources. So I count them all down, kind of like David Letterman style. And then just go to Shift Selling, SHIFT, shiftselling.com. And that's where you'll get access to all those blog posts, all from the front page.
And I do also have a link as well